Hello, I'm Ghost, and I'm your host for the next short while, and I'm going to be revisiting a topic I have not visited in quite some time, but it is essentially my YouTube claim to fame as of right now, which is Urban Spook. Now, a little over a year ago, I made a video talking about Urban Spook as a creator, and his behavior on social media and stuff. Since then, there's been a lot more to the series. There's been a new episode, but also there's just been a lot more weird interactions I've had with Urban and a lot more things I've learned about Urban as a content creator. That being said, this video will not be focusing on Urban as a creator, but rather hard focusing the art that he created. So, for the time being, separate the art from the artist. Let's talk about The Painter, which is Urban Spook's series, as nothing more than a series, and remove the creator from the equation. The Painter follows a, police investigation of a series of killings that is held together by one consistency, being paintings at the scene. Okay, cool. Trying to figure out where to go from here because I feel like I need to actually, recap part of the series, and it goes to show how little story there is in a large portion of the episodes. Basically, we're going to follow various parts of the investigation through these police-type tapes, and we're going to meet characters that are there for, a single episode, including Bill Collins, the cop, and stuff like that. Also, we learn about some victims and families that are, missing, but not, known to be dead yet. All we know is paintings of them, or hints, and weird stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to be recapping the entire story for you here today, because, in all honesty, I believe that the discussion I'm going to be creating functions better if you have actually watched the series yourself. Because something that I feel like has been a big problem with people talking about Urban Spook is I feel like a lot of people haven't actually watched Urban Spook. Sure, the first episode has over 1 million views, but the rest has a big drop-off in views. If you're gonna talk about the series, don't base it off of video essays like this. Actually watch the series, form your opinion, and then indulge in these types of videos. That being said, in the chance that you aren't, the main things you need to know is that in The Painter, there are 2 serial killers going on a vicious killing spree, engaging in pretty much every act of debauchery imaginable, from child molestation to, just a little bit of casual cannibalism, you know what I mean, man? That out of the way, I'd like to discuss the overall quality of the series. Urban Spook is commonly considered to be an example of the worst of analog horror. And, admittedly, I disagree. Analog horror is a vast scene, populated heavily with total garbage.
I will work here till the day I die. Till the day I die.
I don't believe that Urban Spook's The Painter is a particularly good series, but I believe that the way you approach it certainly will have a heavy hand in your thoughts on it as a series. I know that the titles state analog horror, but I believe that you shouldn't approach anything specifically through the lens of a genre. Yes, while I believe that the series falls into the general category that is analog horror, approach it simply as a piece of art. In that case, I believe that your feelings will be different. Maybe not that much more positive, but different. To me, The Painter, for a large portion of its run at least, was really more of an art showcase. Because one thing that I don't believe anyone's insulting is the fact that Urban Spook really is quite good at making spooky paintings. This is an undeniable fact, and it is the strongest part of the series. Whether you believe that he goes too far or not, Urban Spook's paintings are spooky and interesting, and they fit well into the context of the series. The idea of these killers killing and painting victims and stuff like that, is actually not a bad idea. Though not necessarily the world's most original, it's done so in a way that is genuinely quite interesting. And for that, I do have a certain degree of respect for a large portion of the run. Approaching it as really more of an art showcase with context enhancing the paintings does, I believe, make the series a little bit more tolerable. Furthermore, I'd like to state that even looking at it as analog horror, in the grand scheme of analog horror, it really isn't all that bad. The thing with analog horror is that a lot of it is genuinely awful. If you're not very experienced in the scene, you've probably watched the good ones. It's not like a lot of things, where the more popular it is doesn't say anything about the quality, as the vast majority of good analog horror series are the popular ones. Digging deep, for the most part, will only get you trash. So, yes, I have seen a fuck ton of analog horror, and I still believe that the best series are Boysvert and Walton Files. I've seen a lot of it, and those are two of the biggest names in the entire genre. And yet I stand by those being some of the absolute best of the best. The effort's paid off. They focus on telling an interesting story, and having an interesting style enhance that story. So, I believe they work quite well. Urban Spook, on the other hand, is really just the lower end of the popular analog horror series, bringing it into that realm along with series such as Greylock and Lacey's and Walton and Mandela and all that type of stuff. Yes, it is probably the worst in that conversation, but broadening it to just analog horror series as like a whole, like the full genre, I'd argue that it's certainly in the top 50% of series. And I'm saying that still not being a fan. I'd consider Urban Spook's The Painter to be really a kind of 4 out of 10 if we're doing that type of rating on like IMDb overall. There's a lot of flaws that drag it down and keep it from genuinely becoming good, but there are some seriously strong aspects to the series where it feels like we get close to really doing something cool. The paintings are interesting. On top of that, I am a defender of shock horror. I believe that shock has a purpose in horror, and while I don't necessarily think that something can survive exclusively off of shock, I believe that Urban is also capable of creating an interesting atmosphere to help flesh out the series. And for that, I believe that it genuinely is kind of effective. In terms of problems, it's clear that paintings are done before stories. I feel like Urban, for the vast majority of this series, has not known what to do with the next episode, or known even if he was going to do another episode. It feels mostly like he's just kind of going in with a fuck it, we ball mentality. He, creates some cool art, and then he's like, alright, now I need to make a story so I can just get it out there. It's apparent that the art not only is the hardest part of the series for him, as it requires a lot of effort, but also is the thing he cares about most. And while there certainly is a story that is slowly unraveling and has some cool aspects to it, for the bulk of the series, and keep in mind that I've been saying the bulk of the series throughout this video, we will get there, but for the bulk of the series, it's apparent that storytelling has definitely been the last thing in his head, or at least one of the later things. Which is unfortunate, because analog horror, to me, and I believe to a lot of people, is all about telling interesting stories in the horror genre with a low budget in a unique and new way. I mean, bringing it all the way back to the beginning of the genre, it's always been most closely tied to found footage horror. That's apparent. And found footage horror was also founded upon the idea of simply being low-budget DIY horror movies. So, that's why I believe that analog horror is charming and a good genre conceptually. Anyone can do it, and it's all about telling a good story, basically. Urban kind of stands opposite that, where while it technically falls into the confines of analog horror, it's not the story that comes first. That's, I believe, another problem with the way people look at the series. They're so focused on it being an analog horror series, which, yes, it's in the titles, but let's be honest here, it's how he gets his views, the same way that I'm gonna put, some random painting of his in my thumbnail, just like I did with my previous video with Fuck Toy Corey. But analog horror series shouldn't be looked at as just analog horror series. They should be looked at as more than just a piece of a genre, which is something that I believe has tarnished the series' reputation. Again, I do want to make it clear that I certainly don't believe that Urban Spook's The Painter is a particularly good series. But I do feel the need to defend it, as I believe that a lot of the points people bring up just are kinda stupid. Like, there's a lot wrong with the series that you can argue, but I just believe that a lot of the points come from a POV of naivety, or just lack of experience with this type of thing. Which does lead me to the next point of, no, Urban Spook does not go too far. This is something that's always bothered me, even from before I really sat down and gave the full series a chance and had really only watched small portions of it. I'm a big advocate for no censorship in anything, ever. I fucking hate censorship. I believe it's the perfect way of raping someone's artistic vision, and I hate that. I'm very for do what you want with this type of stuff, especially when it comes to horror. Because, as I've said in several videos now, horror has grown stale. We're not pushing boundaries anymore. I feel like Urban Spook saw the online horror scene and was like, yeah, nah, fuck this, we're pushing all the boundaries. And I totally respect that. And I don't believe he goes too far, because you're not supposed to side with the killers. It's the same reason that and this is the second time I brought this up in a video, it's the same reason why I defend Coffin of Andy and Laylee. No, it does not go too far. These characters are not good people, and the series is not trying to convince you that they are. You're supposed to feel like these people are terrible people, and they are, in fact, doing terrible things. And whether or not you believe that certain subject matter is treated with tact or not, does not mean inherently that it's going too far. It's horror. You're supposed to hate these people. Yeah, they're doing awful stuff. And no, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily being treated with the most dignity. I certainly believe that these topics could be treated with a little bit more acknowledgement for the realness of the problems. And yes, I'm primarily referring to Fuck Toy Corey. In the end, horror is horror. Maybe we all have our own individual sensitivities, but it gives you a warning to fuck off if you're sensitive at the beginning anyway. So stop complaining. I understand that it goes farther than the vast majority of analog horror, and I understand that analog horror has essentially hit a weird point of the internet mainstream where anyone can watch it, including people that are totally inexperienced with horror, and that's a lot of the viewers of analog horror. Okay, fully aware. That does not mean that they have to bend to your own sensitivities and your own comforts. I apologize, but it's simply not how it works in anything, ever, okay? It's up to him what he wants to do, and personally, I believe that the more we complain, the harder he's gonna go. So you're just making it worse for yourself by fucking whining. Obviously, the things that happen in his series are awful, awful, terrible things, and the characters are awful, awful, terrible people. You're supposed to think exactly that. It would be a different story if he was glorifying it. In that case, find him and beat the shit out of him, right? But he isn't. In the end, my biggest problems with The Painter are the following. 1, its story is really scatterbrained. Because it seems like he writes the story after he has paintings done, it's caused the series overall to feel like it's just kind of bullshitted, which does not contribute well to the vibes of the series. It kind of breaks the serious tone a little bit. The guy just uses incorrect grammar at several points in the series, which I know is kind of a weird complaint and makes me seem like a grammar Nazi, but let me explain. Something that always happens, if you use bad grammar and stuff like that, it shows that there wasn't enough effort put into what you've made, that you actually tried smoothing out as much as you could. If you just let that stuff slide through, it's kind of weird. Like, the man never heard of the word were. It's very weird. The fact that these are supposed to be like police tape type things, and yet at the same time, the way everything is worded does not make it seem like that whatsoever, where they're like, these are some of the most violent criminals ever known to man. These people are so disturbed. Like, this type of shit should be a lot more matter-of-fact. I don't know why whoever's making these police tapes happens to feel so passionate that they have to make sure that the intended audience, in-universe audience, is seeing this and being like, oh man, the hands were ripped right on off. Not just ripped off, just ripped right off. Like, thank you, guys, for using the extra words all up in there, but, like, what is this contributing? And, lastly, I suppose, is that in the universe, they keep shifting between showing us photographs and showing us paintings. The issue, every photograph that is, like, you know, built up to is a painting. In the real world, you know, it's all painted. Which is so weird, especially when you have real photos of people at other points in the series, right? You have all these paintings, and either these serial killer painters have mastered the art of realism, or there's just some weird shit going on. I don't know. Like, I'll have my editor show to my left. Here's a photograph from the series, right? And here's a painting from the series. Now here's a real photograph of a person in the series. You see the issue here? It does not make sense. Get a little bit of consistency, guys. It's a little bit annoying. But whatever. I understand, okay? We chill now. But it's just really weird and breaks the immersion so badly. Oh yeah, I would like to say the pacing of the series is awful. It keeps jumping like 5 days ago, 3 years ago, all this bullshit. It's really annoying. Now I'd like to revisit the whole part of the video where I keep saying for a vast majority of the series and stuff like that. That's because, if you are not aware, Hell was a well-received Urban Spook episode, or at least mostly well-received. Kinda crazy, right? Mostly because it's clear that there was a lot more effort put in. No longer is it simply shoddily slapped together stuff with a big focus on just like, here's the paintings. It actually knows what it wants to do and does it a lot better. The scenes are a lot more high effort, with the cops' body cam footage in particular, looking throughout the entire factory and all that. It's actually pretty spooky, and it clearly required a lot of effort, which is cool. Plus, it actually feels like he wrote the story first, and then properly used the story to enhance the paintings by making the paintings afterward to enhance the story in equal amount. The paintings are shocking in this one, but they actually feel like a real payoff to something. Meanwhile, in previous episodes, they don't really feel like anything besides another part of the whatever, right? It's kind of like one big hunk of whatever. This actually makes everything feel like it's an actual tool to enhance the episode overall, an actual individual tool, and so I believe that the paintings are used better. But it actually feels like there's a real story. We start making some actual progress, and it feels like there's some real characters. Remember how I mentioned a cop, Bill Collins, at the beginning of the video? That's because supposedly that is one of the two killers, who is now shot and killed, as we see at the end of the episode. The other one was a female, which I guess was like a thing that some people were interested in, whether or not one of the killers was a female. They're in jail, and they admitted to over 100 murders. So, it actually felt like we really started expanding on this. It feels like there's an actual world now. It feels like the story is actually being fleshed out a little bit. And it still doesn't seem as though he's compromising any of the strong aspects of previous episodes to get to that point where it feels like it's just more well fleshed out. So, at that point, with the episode Hell, it feels like you can actually approach it as more than just a simple art showcase with extra steps. It feels like a genuinely real series, I guess, if that makes any sense. You're officially able to approach this as a piece of horror, and I have hopes for the finale, as I believe that he's now proven that he really can, if he puts the time in, make something that is much more well fleshed out. So I'm excited to see where this goes. All in all, Urban Spook's a unique creator, and while I believe that there's a lot more that can be said about who he is as a creator since I last talked about him, I felt like it was more important, at least to me, to talk about the art he's actually created. As, well, again, I don't believe that The Painter is a particularly good series overall. I think that the vast majority of the hate is unfair. If you're gonna hate on it, though, at least actually give it a try for yourself. Don't just simply jump on the bandwagon. I've certainly made that mistake in previous years with things that I ended up really appreciating or being gravely mistaken on. The bandwagon doesn't mean shit. Watch it for yourself, and if you like it, good for you, and if you don't, well, you know. That being said, just gonna put it out there. If you own a Fuck Toy Corey shirt, you should probably go to a little bit of therapy. Thank you. I'm Ghost. I've been your host. Thank you for making it this far in the video, and I hope to see you again in the future.